Whoa! Living the dream. You weren't expecting that at all, were you?
I was expecting music, no.
This is a high-class production now that I've got all these new toys.
Okay.
So long and short of the whole entire thing is I decided I wanted to do this podcast, right? Mm-hmm. And typical Nathan, I don't know anything about anything when it comes to technical stuff. So I went out and I purchased all the crap that you see in this room. Like, I bought the wrong cameras at first, which didn't do long recordings. I bought microphones that didn't work. I bought like all this stuff that was wrong. And basically through YouTube, I figured out how to do a podcast.
Okay.
So I went out and bought this snazzy new little thing that does all this stuff and plays music. By the way, I think the music that we just played is just like bog standard on there already.
Okay.
So anyway, I
sounded professional though. So.
Yeah, so it sounds professional. So it is the business. So with that in mind, I think that's pretty much everything set up. The sound sounds okay. Everything sounds okay in the microphone, right?
Sounds fine. Yes.
Right. So we're recording on all the cameras, so we should be good to go. It's bugging me that this is backwards and you can't see yourself, so I'm just going to turn that around, right?
Okay.
Whoa!
There I am.
There you are. Well, and I just got alcohol-free beer all over my sleeve, as you do. Okay, right. What's happening? This is it. This is going to be the podcast, mate.
Nothing too exciting.
Nothing too exciting, right? So you are clear with my direction with this, and so everybody else is kind of clear with this. The reason I want to do a podcast is we have great conversation whenever you guys come over to the house, right? Where I actually learn stuff from you guys. I learn a lot from you because you know a lot about needless things and important things both, right? But overall, I don't know how you feel about this, but I personally don't have a large circle of friends, and I don't have a large circle of people that I actually have decent conversation with, right?
Really?
I've got
You're
loads.
constantly talking to people.
Well, I'm constantly talking, but there's talking and then there's absolute bullshitting, which is basically what I do a lot of, right? I've got rapport with loads of people, but I don't actually sit down and talk about actual subjects that are of really any importance. Occasionally we'll get on something like religion, or we'll get on politics, at Thanksgiving when I do my infamous world famous turkey deep fried turkey.
Yes.
The Tice turkey drop, as I like to call it. So we, I often don't have great conversation. So I thought to myself, right, I'm in a position where I can I guess build this studio. I've got the extra space here at the office. I'm in a position where I can learn how to do this. Mm-hmm. Why not do it, right?
Okay.
That way I can have better conversation and just get on with things. Okay.
Right.
So having said that, an interesting thing that's happened in the last week is the political election here in the UK.
Yeah.
Now, of all the people I know, you are probably the most, I say, schooled in politics, right?
Okay, yeah.
And actually very aware of what's going on and how things work. Now, in my own ignorance, I've been in the UK now for almost 15 years.
Okay.
And as you know, I can't vote.
No,
right?
you can't.
So a lot of times when it comes to the kind of framework of politics and everything that's going on, it's kind of lost on me. Because one, if I see something in the news that is happening, I either ignore it, unless it's funny. Right. Or I kind of go, okay, whatever. I can't really influence it anyway because I'm not allowed to vote being on a permanent leave to remain visa here. And I've chosen, actually, finally, I'll announce it here. I decided to get my English passport after 15 years just because going forward, I want to be able
passport.
to. Yeah, my British passport. See, there you go. I can't even get England and British right. So, yes, my British passport. So that kind of stuff is interesting to me, right? So I think that I need to be more involved in both personal politics here, where I actually live now with my family, and I'm seeing.
You don't have to be.
Well, I know you don't have to be, but I kind of choose to be.
Most people aren't.
But if you're not, then all you can do is sit back and just bitch and complain about what's going on, and you haven't done anything to kind of change it. So for me, politics or the right to vote is a very important thing, obviously, right? Because it's one of the ways that you can sway what's happening on in your immediate society. Mm-hmm. Or maybe that's me just being ignorant. Like I look at it as, I'll be honest, I haven't voted in 15 years, and I actually don't.
Have you not voted in the US ones?
And I haven't voted in the U.S. elections because I don't feel that I have the right to vote in the U.S. elections anymore because I'm so withdrawn from everything that's happening back home that actually the last few times I've been back to America, it's almost like I'm on holiday to France or something like that. You know what I mean? It's all that completely different. That I don't feel that I have a right to have an opinion about what's happening in the States because basically I'm probably never going to live there again, and I'm probably going to stay in England, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that's kind of why I haven't done it. So bearing that in mind, one of the reasons I wanted to kind of, I guess, talk to you is because you absolutely know the system through and through. You seem to be a pretty educated guy. It's true. You seem to be you're an educated dude who doesn't have knee-jerk reactions, right? Like so one of the problems I have with how things have been going lately, with this general election and with Brexit, with all this stuff, right, is I get snippets. And I'm also guilty of this. I get snippets of either Facebook memes or stories that are taken out of context, where they put stuff like that on social media, right?
Yes, you don't get very kind of clear news. You're only getting kind of like bits and pieces from places, which are going to have a certain slant on them.
And I think that if me, I mean, the amount of people I meet, right, and the amount of conversation I try to have, and I still find myself completely ignorant to the political landscape of both the UK and the States, right? All I hear from both sides is I hear loads of people bitching, loads of people complaining. I hear the same kind of issues, and I don't hear a lot of straight answers, which I think a lot of people are in the same boat, where you don't hear the right information.
Well, the problem with that is there's often not a straight answer to give.
Well, okay, so why is that? Is that because people just aren't being straightforward? Because I personally think
because a lot of things are very complicated, and so you can't just give a general answer to something.
Yeah, that's something we can get into in a bit, right? So I have a problem with the fact that the information that I do get from a party, like, so for instance, did you read the manifestos of both parties? No, right.
No,
so
no one reads the manifestos.
Yeah, well,
not even the MPs read the manifestos.
Well, that I think is a problem, right? Because there's
too much emphasis put on a manifesto.
There is, but that's how else do you know what's going on? Do you know what's going on just by again these snippets that we're talking about on Facebook, or do you actually know what's going on? Because as an individual, do you personally research everything that you're interested in, or do you just take sound bites?
If there's something I'm interested in, I'll kind of look it up and everything. But in terms of general kind of news, I just I look at the BBC website, the app on my phone each day, and that's about it.
And you get everything from one source, is what I'm saying, right?
Well, no, I mean I watch other news shows occasionally, and other things, but there's people I follow on Twitter. But I try to, I mean, the people I follow on Twitter are kind of like most of them are unbiased.
Yeah.
There's a few which are biased in certain areas, but I know that, and therefore I don't kind of like rely on them just for just one information.
Okay.
I mean, something like the BBC, I mean, they obviously got a lot of flack over the election, but they will give you a rounded kind of just general thing, and then you just kind of use your brain to kind of like to filter that out.
Right. Okay. When you say a rounded general thing, you don't think that they're biased to either party at any given point, or because one of the things I hate watching, right, is I hate somebody like Piers Morgan, or who's this cat that called out Boris in the election, the guy that said, we've had every prime minister candidate on for every election.
Andrew Neil.
Yes. So like that seems like he's like actually.
See, Andrew Neil is an example of someone who can be biased, but can also give you be a good source of information. He is for the newspapers he's edited, and he is whatever he is of the Spectator magazine. He is well known as being right wing, centre right, whatever. He is towards the right.
Okay.
And so therefore, people say, oh, well, he's biased. Well, yeah, his personal views are biased, but when he does his job, when he interviews politicians, he will thoroughly research it, and he will attack both sides equally as much.
Okay, yeah.
So it is fine to necessarily have someone who's biased, But so long as they are doing their job in a equal way, it's useful.
Yeah, I suppose you can pick and choose what you want to take from each thing, is what you're saying, right?
But in terms of the BBC being biased, I mean, they get stick from both sides. They get called left wing from people on the right, and they get called right wing from people on the left. So people normally say, well, they're doing a good job. They're in the middle then.
Yeah.
They're slightly biased in terms of, and this will be the same with a lot of the political correspondents. They are biased towards the government because that is a lot of where they get their information from.
Right.
So they are dependent on those, and so therefore they amplify whatever they receive.
What, those bits of information?
Yes, because they're kind of like, I guess you could call them, they're kind of like political junkies. They need that fix of information.
Yeah.
And the main source of stuff comes from the government. And so therefore they like that. So therefore that kind of like they can feed on that. So that's why it's kind of like they give out more of that information than from the other places.
So without reading the manifestos, which obviously you said you haven't.
I mean, you could get it. I mean, you don't have to read the manifestos to know what a party is standing for. They'll tell you in smaller chunks of information.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So you don't have to read it from cover to cover.
So one of the things I found interesting about this particular election was there was the one, and again, forgive me because I don't know specific names, but I saw this lady who was asked about the NHS with the 50,000 jobs or whatever. We're going to create 50,000 jobs, of which was it like 15,000 or something like that, or 20,000 were already existing jobs that they were saving, supposedly, right?
Exactly.
And
that's a very typical, and this is no. This isn't just what the Conservatives have done. All parties do this. It's kind of a typical way of using some figures, whereby you say you're going to do something, but you also include something else, which is already going to happen.
Yeah, do me a favor, point that straight at your face, basically, instead of at your head. There you go. That's
like
better.
That?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you can just use and therefore it's not incorrect, but it's not correct. It's both. Which people say, well, how can that be?
Yeah, how can that be?
Yeah, but it can, because the information is correct that there we go. That they are going to be these jobs, but it is also including these other jobs as well. So they can say, oh, yes, but it's correct, and the opposition party can say, oh, no, it's incorrect, and both are correct.
Yeah, okay, so that's what I'm saying. So my problem with that whole entire snippet of watching that was that she didn't say exactly what you just said. Not that it's correct or incorrect, it's just she should have said, look, here's the deal, right? Our numbers include 50,000, and 15,000 of that are going to be jobs that we save, which we're counting as jobs that we're creating. So technically, we're creating 35,000 jobs, but we're saving 15,000 jobs.
Though. Why would they say that?
Why wouldn't they say that? That's the problem I have with kind of that particular situation.
Whenever a politician is interviewed, and this is one of the sad situations now, which we've gone through in the last, 30 or 40 years, is politicians just want to get across just a certain piece of information. And they don't want to get into more discussions about it. So when you see a politician interviewed, and they've been all media trained, so
which I haven't been media trained, by the way.
Me neither. So that's what they're going to do. They're just going to be. They just want to get out the certain information that the party wants them to get out, and they don't want to divulge anything else. So that's why they'll use phrases like, "Well, the real question is," and "Well, if something along those lines." They will try and get out as little other information as possible.
Yeah, okay, right. So they're staying to a top line.
Yeah.
I suppose it's marketing 101, really, isn't it? If you're trying to get a message across, you want to stay pretty much in the confines of that message and not deviate from the point, which is what I do quite a bit, is I always deviate from the point and distract certain situations. Okay, all right, so that's interesting. So so one question I have, or another question that I have, is after the fact. We always see all this information after the fact, this would have been the result if X, Y, and Z would have happened. Now, for those of the audience that probably don't understand how the political system in the UK works, if you could just kind of elaborate on how. So we have local councils here. Okay.
Yes.
So and again, you're going to have to correct me if I mess this up.
Okay.
In Great Britain.
Yes.
Is it okay to refer to it as Great Britain, right? Because that's
The
technically what
United
it is.
Kingdom, Great Britain, and Northern Ireland.
Right, correct. And Northern Ireland. Why do we separate and Northern Ireland? Because I always get loads of shtick whenever I go to Ireland.
Because Great Britain is the island which has England, Wales, and Scotland on it.
Right, yeah.
And then, so there's Great Britain. As in terms of the British Isles, we're going really off track here.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
In geographical term, I mean, we call it the British Isles. The Irish don't particularly like that, obviously. But the British Isles, containing the two main islands of Great Britain and Ireland, and all the other smaller islands like the Isle of Man and etc. So those are the British Isles, and then, as I said, Great Britain, Scotland, England, and Wales. And so therefore, it is the United Kingdom, because we are united, supposedly, kingdom. And we are the United Kingdom of Great Britain, as I said, Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Used to be Ireland prior to 1920 something or other.
Yeah, so this is where I always get loads of shtick. So I do a lot of business over in Ireland occasionally, right, as you know. And the last time I went over, I was in a pub, and I was kind of having a basic conversation with this chap, and I basically said to him, I said, yeah, here in Southern Ireland. And it was like you saw in one of those Wild West
Southern
films.
Ireland.
I said Southern Ireland,
okay,
right?
Yeah.
And it was like the whole entire bar pub just went quiet, and everybody just kind of like was looking my direction, and I was like, what did I do wrong? And he was like, it's Ireland, we're not Southern Ireland. And he was actually very strong about his answer. Yes. So Ireland, Ireland outside of this conversation, as obviously they stand alone, and even though they're part of Great Britain.
Who? Ireland aren't a part of Great
Ireland aren't part of Great Britain at all then?
No.
Okay, so here I am. I'm 15 years in the game, and I'm very ignorant to this fact, even though I spend loads of time with it.
Great Britain, England, Scotland, Wales.
Does not include Ireland, it includes Northern Ireland, right? So that's where you're factually correct.
No, Northern Ireland is not part of Great Britain.
Why is Northern Ireland not part of Great Britain, and when they go on our same laws and all that kind of stuff? This is so again, this is stuff that I don't understand.
Let's go through that again.
Okay, fine. Okay. Sorry, I might not have been listening correctly. You just explained that, basically,
right.
Did you?
Yes. Great Britain is a geographical term for the island, which includes England, Scotland, and Wales.
Yes.
So imagine the British Isles in your head. You've got two islands, two main big islands, which are Great Britain and Ireland.
Correct.
Okay. So we say the United Kingdom, which is the official country, the United Kingdom, you know, the one at the UN and everything, all like that,
right?
Of which the Boris Johnson is the Prime Minister of, is the United Kingdom, because it is united, joined together, kingdom, because we have a queen, of Great Britain, which is the geographical term of England, Scotland, and Wales, and Northern Ireland.
Right, because Northern Ireland is broken.
So, for example, the Isle of Man is not a part of the United Kingdom. It is a separate entity.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I knew that.
Same with the Channel Islands.
Okay.
Their Crown dependency, they're not part of the United Kingdom. So it is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
So for me, I think the reason I always get confused with this is simply the fact that it's all the same color on the map. Yes. When you look at a globe and you see Great Britain, it's all one color on the globe, and it confuses the hell out.
We are one country. Well, we are one country, but we're also different countries.
Right. Okay. And this is another reason why I often get confused when anytime we have political conversations like this.
Right.
I have friends that are Scottish, and they still want to claim independence and that kind of thing.
Yes.
And I'm sure that's a little off tangent. But yeah. So okay. So you have the whole entire country set up the way it is now. Within Britain, am I being correct there in my term? Right.
Sure.
Sure, whatever. Within Britain, there are loads of councils, right?
Yes.
And loads of boroughs, basically. So if you look at the political landscape of the states, for instance, okay, we have all the states set up separately, which all make up America. Whereas in England, I guess I have to get my head around the fact that there isn't local law like there would be, say, for instance, if you were in Ohio and Pennsylvania, and one charged sales tax and the other one didn't.
Yes.
Right.
Well, we do slightly. I mean, there are separate things in Scotland, for example.
Yeah, but Scotland being, even though it's still,
well, it has its own, because it was own country which then joined in into the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
They retain things like their own law system and things like that. So things which were set up before they joined together.
Okay, so it might be helpful if you could explain, to get back to my original point before I kind of deviated, how the actual election works. So in the States, we have the Electoral College, obviously, which you're familiar with, right? So each state has a different weighting for the amount of electoral votes towards the overall election.
Well, that was done in order to balance out the smaller states with the bigger states.
Right. So can you just explain the difference between how that system works in America and how we do our voting system in the UK, please?
Well, the Electoral College is used for the presidential election, and we don't have a presidential election for a start.
Okay, it's an election.
Well,
same shit, different day. It's an election. It's the people all getting together and casting a vote on who's going to run shit.
No, because the election we've just had, the general election, it would be more akin to the election to the Senate or the representatives, which
in turn dictate which party runs the government. So it's kind of exactly like a presidential election in my eyes. I could be wrong, right? That could be the way I look at it, and maybe I'm seeing it completely different. So one thing I get confused with quite often is like, so for instance, you're electing a party, and that party can then elect a prime minister within the party. So obviously we've had changes where the people didn't elect Boris Johnson to be prime minister. The party did, correct?
Yes.
So essentially it's the exact same thing.
We don't elect our prime minister.
Yeah, right. So
the prime minister is appointed by the Queen.
So I guess when I look at politics here, and I look at the results of the last election, I think that a lot of the knee-jerk stuff that you were seeing on social media was not about a policy of the party. It was still about the individuals running the show.
Yes.
You see what I mean? Yeah. You see so I guess that's where I'm confusing the whole point of, okay, they're both elections to elect who governs the land, right? They're both elections, except in America we're electing a representative or an individual who represents a party, whereas in England we're electing a party which can then elect the individual who's going to run the country, who's going to be the prime minister, right?
We don't elect a prime minister, so therefore you are electing a party, even though you're not actually electing a party anyway. You are electing an MP.
Yeah.
So it is not,
and I still can't get my head around that, right? So.
Well, this is the thing with the elections. I mean, you were talking about the manifestos earlier. People don't necessarily vote on manifestos. I mean, probably very few people vote on manifestos. There are lots of different. Everybody has their own reason for voting for whoever they voted for.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
so they may vote for the specific person, their MP. They may vote for a party. They may vote for who they think will be the PM from that. Probably in this last election, a lot of people voted for who they voted for because they didn't want a certain other person to be prime minister.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. Yes. So a lot
of they didn't directly do that.
Like, for instance, if I could have voted in this election, I love a lot of the things that the Labour Party were putting forward.
Okay,
Jeremy Corbyn, for instance. I personally wouldn't want the dude running the show, right? So when I looked at the actual policies, which the manifesto basically explained what the policies are going to be, in theory, everything that I saw was very common sense, and it seemed to make sense, right, to a point, except for I wondered who was going to pay for it all, which I'm sure was the average kind of person's take on the whole situation.
Well, both main parties were promising a lot of spending.
Yes, yeah, which obviously has to come from somewhere. However, I would have been swayed to go the other direction for the main reason that I couldn't get my head around the dude as an individual. And I know we had a little bit of rapport about Diane Abbott, right? Mm-hmm. But in the back of my mind, all I can think is, okay, we elect Labor. Something happens to Jeremy Corbyn. The dude's getting on in years. He has a heart attack. And all of a sudden the party has nobody else to step up into his shoes except Diane Abbott, and she's running the country. That's how I looked at it, right? In layman's term, I looked at it as in, okay, so she could actually be running the country if something happens to the dude who's actually running the show in the first place.
Well,
I'm correct.
No, because she would have to be appointed prime minister, which wouldn't necessarily be the case, and she would have to be elected the leader of the party to be in a position to be appointed prime minister. And also, you're putting a lot of emphasis on the person running the country. They don't necessarily have the power that you think they have.
Yes, but this goes back to the original point of social media and the fact that on the other end of the coin, right? So all I see are loads of things going. Boris is selling the NHS to Donald Trump, right? Boris is doing this. Boris is doing that, and those are the snippets that I'm talking about. So as far as overall information that you got from the actual election itself, you're saying to me that you get that information from news and by your own means, you take your own take on it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I get stuff from social media as well. I see what's going on, what people are saying, but you've got to. Social media is its own thing. It doesn't necessarily have the power you think it does.
Meaning what? Because I think social media influences a lot of the whole. I mean, it's proven that social media has changed the landscape of politics. Right?
If you're looking at social media, you would have presumed going into Thursday, you would have thought that Labour could possibly have won the election, and whilst actually, as you can see, they had absolutely no chance whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, and I totally thought, based on my news feed and everything that was coming through with my particular people that I know. See, now this is the other thing about the whole situation and why I wanted to start a podcast talking to different people. Is I thought that Labor, hands down, we're going to sweep the whole entire thing, right? Mm-hmm. There was only one thing in the back of my mind that thought, it's the Brexit situation, which may sway things in the other direction, and that's a whole different kettle of fish that we can discuss. The pros and cons of
that might be in another podcast.
Perhaps, or it could be in this one, depending on how we go, Christopher.
I do have to go home at some point.
Oh, he's already looking at his clock, and we're like, what are we like? We're like 30 minutes in, and he's like, I do have to leave eventually, Dean. Okay, yeah, fine. Then we can do it on another podcast then. But so I suppose. So all right, let's not get off tangent. Let's go back to how the actual election process works in the UK. Okay. So you're electing a party, and
no, you're electing an MP.
I will say, as before, you said you weren't electing. You're electing. Oh yeah, the MP being the local.
You're not electing the prime minister. You're not electing a party. You're electing an MP.
You're electing an MP to your local, I guess.
Which is why, for example, we had in the last Parliament, you had a lot of people who defected from their parties. So, for example, they left either Conservatives or they left Labour, and then they decided to sit as an independent MP, or they eventually joined another party.
Right, the coalition and all that kind of business.
No, there was the small, what were they called? They were called the, whatever it is for Change UK. That was what they were called. And then they had to change their name a lot. Or some people joined the Lib Dems, for example. And people people said, oh, why aren't they standing for a by-election? Do you know what a by-election is?
So by-election meaning changing like midway through.
A by-election is when an MP gets elected when there isn't a general election.
Yeah.
They independently get elected as, for example, if one dies or is...
Right, I'm sorry. So can that happen on a local level? So this is kind of the point I was trying to get to. So for those that don't understand how it works in the UK, it's very similar to me, or how I look at it, to kind of make sense of it in my own mind, which we find out is wrong all the time while we're having conversations like this, is you would take, like, say, for instance, we would look at Britain, and we would break that up in counties. So this is how I look at it as an American, right? I'm familiar with counties. Okay. So I was born and raised in...
Counties don't really mean much over here.
Right.
Counties are ceremonial mostly.
But counties are kind of akin and parallel to a council, to a local council.
Not always, no.
Not always, but there are a few things...
For example, Cheshire, the county that we live in, is split up into 4 parts.
Is it? So Cheshire East, West.
So Cheshire, yeah, and then there's the 2 up north, which are
the Wirral and something else, right?
Something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Warrington.
Warrington, yeah, right. Okay. Now, I didn't know until recently that happens for a reason. So, if we look at the election,
they are forever changing the boundaries for local.
But they changed the boundaries because of the numbers. So this is the point I was going to get to. So say for instance in the U.S. we have California, which gets, I don't know whatever it is, say 14 or 20% or 20 electoral votes.
They got a lot because they're the biggest state.
They're a bigger state.
Yes.
So what they've done to actually change that process in the UK is they've made all of the local counties, we'll call them counties, or in this case they would be boroughs, right? Cheshire is a borough, right? Or councils, local councils. What is it?
Local authority.
Local authority. Yes. They've made them all roughly the same size so that every vote counts, right?
No, you're getting confused.
I'm confused. That's why I'm asking you.
No. You're separating things, local government and national government.
Right, I'm talking about just in the electoral process for what we've just gone through.
For the House of Commons, which we just had the election for, the general election, you are voting for an MP which represents a constituency. Now,
right,
the constituency. Sometimes they reflect a local authority, but often they don't. For example, ours is Cheshire. Is Crewe and Nantwich.
Crewe and Nantwich, right. Sorry, that's where I was getting wrong.
That is our constituency, but we are in the local authority of Cheshire East.
Okay, so to elaborate on that, so we're not talking about counties, we're not talking about anything anymore. Now it's constituencies. And the constituencies, they're the same size all over the UK. Now, the boundaries for the constituencies
they're roughly
changing?
The same size. They did there's a thing called the Electoral Commission. Boundary Commission. There's Electoral Commission as well, but there's something else. Boundary Commission, which is set up to kind of like look into the borders and everything. They did do a review because we were due a review because they review it every now and then in order to make them kind of keep them equal. They did a review in the last Parliament, the last few years ago. They were set up because they were looking to reduce, as part of, there was this all to do, linked in with the expenses scandal and everything. It was all kind of about the fact that politics and everything is too expensive.
Right.
We have too many in the House of Lords, which is another thing. We have too many MPs because we have 660 odd now. So that is quite a lot around the world in terms of parliaments. That's quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean 660 is like.
So they wanted to reduce it down, looking at a figure of 600. So they did a review, looking at new boundaries. But in order for that to go through, that would need to be legislation, and so therefore get through Parliament. The last Parliament was exceedingly tight. A lot of MPs wouldn't want to vote for that. Two reasons. For a start, turkeys don't vote for Christmas. They're not going to vote to reduce the amount of MPs because then some of them will be out of a job.
Yeah.
600 of them will be out of a job. That's 60 of them will be out of a job. And also the boundaries, having less of them would impact a certain parties, mostly Labour, and so therefore obviously Labour weren't too keen on it either.
Now why is that? Why would it impact? Is that because the boroughs would change or the
constituencies?
Sorry, the constituencies would change, as in. So, say for instance, at the moment you've got Hackney. They're
slightly more favoured because there's more kind of urban constituencies, and so therefore that's why it is more.
Yeah, but so
towards them.
Yeah, so in theory they could take 660 seats and they could make them 330 seats just by making the constituencies double the size, right? Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like it makes sense. Why wouldn't they do that? It makes perfect sense to me.
To have them smaller.
Yeah. Have them larger.
Yeah. Have smaller amount of MPs. Yes, but parties aren't necessarily going to vote for something which is going to take their power away. Same reason why we don't have PR.
Right, and you can. I'd love to get into that if you could explain that to me.
Proportional representation.
Yes, could you put that in layman's terms for me?
At the moment, we have a first past the post system whereby whoever gets it is what it is. Whoever gets more than anybody else wins the seat.
Correct. Yes.
Proportional representation. There's different forms of it, but it means that, for example, in this last election just gone, I don't know the exact figures, but the percentage vote that they got and the percentage of the seats for Labour was roughly the same.
Yeah.
So the amount of percentage they got in the whole election and percentage of the vote and the percentage of the seats they got was the same. The Conservatives got more percentage of seats than votes. The Lib Dems got massively less seats than the vote they got. Same with the Greens, and the same with Brexit Party. Brexit Party got a reasonable amount of votes.
Yeah, I saw that.
No seats at all.
Right.
Green Party, once again, reasonable amount of votes. One MP. SNP, because they are all located in Scotland. Nationally,
it's like 40.
Very small percent of the vote, but a huge
in Scotland. Yeah, they got 45 seats or something like that, right?
Yeah, they got a huge amount of seats because they're concentrated in one area.
Right.
So that is on parties like Brexit Party, the Lib Dems, and the Greens. That is very unfair for them.
Okay, and so how would you get around that then? So what's
by the most simplest form of PR would simply be allocating the seats based on the percentage of the vote you got. So, for example, if the SNP only got, say, 5% nationally, they would only get 5% of the seats.
Yeah, but how do they do that on a local level then?
You don't. You get rid of constituencies.
So you get rid of constituencies across the board, and then you have to then what? Then the party elects those representatives, or
there are various forms of PR where you can do that. You can have things whereby you pick a person off a list who you want to be elected as an MP, and then they would get in. Or you can have just a list system whereby the parties just draw up a list of who they want, and then they just go down the list. So Boris Johnson would be top of the list, and then they'd work their way down until they got to the percentage they got, and whoever's in that gets it.
Yeah, see, for me, it seems to make more sense to do it on the way it is now, because you're gonna know something about your local MP. Allegedly, but here's the thing, right? So I'm local to Crewe and Nantwich, and I don't think it matters. That's what. So here in our local constituency, there was a doctor who ran,
yes,
and he won for the Conservatives, right? Yes. Against the current or the former current MP, yes, Laura, who had gotten in. After quite a few years of Conservative rule in Crewe and Nantwich, right?
No, not that many.
I thought Timson did like a few terms, like
no,
8 or 10 years.
No, it was only one. No, he won a by-election, so he was just like say 1.5.
Ah, right, okay.
Terms.
But I guess my point is that both the local guys, except for and that probably was a great noise in the microphone. Both of the local guys, apart from a flyer that we had through the door at the house, I had no idea what they've done on any kind of national or international or political level, international, you know what I mean, on a national level or local level at all, besides what was on the flyer.
Candidates?
The candidates. I had no idea. I wouldn't have known them from...
Doubtful they would have done anything national at all.
But they were so what was it that she resigned from?
Her
Laura Smith. Yeah, she resigned from something after she won the first time, right? Or allegedly was going to resign from her position.
She became a shadow minister. She wasn't a shadow minister. She was she was something related to the shadow government.
Okay, that's something we can get into.
Cabinet.
Yeah, park that, because I want to talk about what I want to park. Let's park that as well.
Okay,
let's revisit that. So I guess
she was appointed to something kind of close to the shadow government, and she then resigned that, and therefore because you're supposed to go along with the party on voting for everything. She wanted to vote against the party on something, and so she resigned that.
Right. Okay. So for me, it's very important that the MPs that are local to you have sway on a local level. Okay. So for instance, if you have an issue with something that's happening in town, your school, your whatever, Who do you go to? Do you go to a counselor or do you go to your MP?
Depends what it's about.
How do you differentiate?
It probably as to who has influence on it.
Yeah, so I'm not talking about like a bin collection on Tuesday is messed up.
You would go
I'm not
to the
gonna,
council.
Yeah, I'm not going to go to my MP.
No.
However,
Although some people do.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people wouldn't know what the difference is between the two of them.
Well, this is why I'm asking. So the MP, the local MP, usually will run a surgery. They'll run call-in hours so they can be in touch with the people who've elected them, etc.
Yes.
Right. So an interesting thing for me in this one is I wouldn't know either Laura or this doctor. I apologize, I don't know your name, sir.
Kieran Mullen, I think.
Kieran Mullen.
It's Kieran something or other.
Yeah, I wouldn't know them if they were packing my groceries at the store and helping me to the car. I wouldn't have a clue who they are. So
He was a doctor at the hospital at Leighton.
Okay. Well, hopefully I'll never have to meet him in an emergency situation one day.
I doubt he'll be there at the moment. No.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I think he was at Leighton.
But I suppose the point I'm making is how do you know the difference between the two systems? Being one, you at least know your local individual. Allegedly, you know who you're voting for MP, but you're voting for a side because you're so polarized between left and right, which you can explain that. But left and right is probably not a good example. Conservative and Labor, right? Am I getting them right? Yeah.
Yes,
if I get them wrong, you just feel free to interrupt.
Okay, will do.
You're literally just voting for a party. You're not voting for an individual. So my take on it.
You can, for example. In our next door constituency of Edisbury, the person who was the MP there was Antoinette Sandbach.
Right.
Now, she was voted as Conservative. She resigned from the Conservatives because she wanted to vote for. I think she voted for the deal at one point, and then she kind of like didn't. She didn't want to go with the hard Brexit.
Okay.
We'll get to another time. And so she left the Conservatives. And she was sitting as an independent for a while. And then she joined the Lib Dems. And she didn't win her seat this time, but she came second. Now, a lot of that vote that she got wouldn't necessarily be just because she was the Lib Dem candidate. Would be kind of a lot of personal vote because she had reasonably good, probably, I presume, a local MP who people knew about. They also knew her position on Brexit, and so they voted for her specifically for that. So they're not just anonymous people. Sometimes you will get candidates who people know a lot about and will vote for because of who they are. People vote for many different reasons.
Okay. Yeah. And
so you can have a personal. What's the term?
A personal agenda.
No. Oh no. What's the word? I can't remember the word. You know, when you have your mandate, a personal mandate.
A personal mandate on how you feel you should vote because of what's going to happen.
You can be elected on a personal mandate, not just for your party.
Oh, right. Yeah. But that hasn't happened in the UK in the last 3 elections, I'm right?
There's people who are elected all the time on personal mandate.
Was there anybody elected in this campaign that was a personal mandate?
Well, you mean like an independent? I don't mean exactly like an independent. There are people who will be voted for because of who they are rather than which party they represent.
Right.
So there are people who could necessarily buck the trend. If the trend is going that they're switching from Labour to Conservative, there may be a person who gets in on Labour because there are people who are willing to vote for them because they like them.
Yes, yeah, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but it still seems to be a 2-horse race in almost every single place you look outside of Scotland.
No, can be different elsewhere.
So if you look at the Lib Dems, for instance, took how many seats in this election?
Not many,
but
11, I think.
But for the most part, it's going to be a 2-horse race because I think the average person will as happens.
Well, that would be another podcast. Why we have a two party system,
I think
the failure of a third party to break into that.
I think that it's a serious thing to talk about. I mean, I don't know what the answer to it is. Obviously, this is what I'm saying. But like when
PR would be one of the things which would fix that.
But I don't understand how you would then get somebody, or I suppose it's not that I don't understand. I don't know if there is really that big of a difference between a PR system where you're going to elect a party and you could get whatever individual was.
Well, because at the moment, because it's a chicken and egg situation. Because there are two main parties which can form the government, you kind of have to. A lot of people feel they have to vote for one of them, because otherwise their vote is wasted.
Yeah, but
therefore, you're not voting for the people who you want to vote for. You're voting for the least worst option.
Yeah, which seems very parallel to a PR system to me, because like I wouldn't want to just...
Well, the PR system, you would therefore vote whoever you wanted to. The thing with the PR system is you don't get a dominant party who would at the moment the system favours one party who would then become more kind of larger.
Right.
So as I said, with the percentage of seats that they got and the percentage of vote they got, Labour's was about the same. Conservatives, they got more seats than they got votes, percentage of votes. So that it was more favoured towards them. It's happened with Labour. It does happen whereby Labour have got more seats based higher than the amount of votes they got. So it can happen to either of the parties, but that is what first past the post does. It favours one party and puts them into government. So it is designed to give strong governments, and people generally like that. Is why a lot of the reason why people don't like PR. They used to like that. Otherwise, you would get lots of smaller parties, and therefore you have to have coalitions. And in this country, we are kind of like, we're not too keen on coalitions.
Yeah, but it just seems like it makes more sense because you're more connected with the local MP, right? Like for me, if I'm going to vote for
you can have constituencies in PR. You can. There are systems where you can do that.
Right.
For example, in the European elections, the system we use there, we have constituency. Our constituency would be the Northwest.
Okay.
So therefore, you do have an MEP who represents the North. Well, you do for the moment. We'll be going soon, but you have an MEP who represents the Northwest, and so they will be your MEP.
Right.
But there's a few of them representing different parties, so you can still have a link to an area with a PR system.
I suppose I still get scared, and I think that if you had a PR system, you could
have a PR system with the constituencies you have now. You could not necessarily a straight PR. You can have alternative systems.
Okay. So at any point,
slightly fairer.
Right. At any point, if I have a PR system, can Diane Abbott run the country?
It is doubtful Diane Abbott will ever.
No. But that's my question is then. So if you have a PR system, let's just say, for instance, that the Conservative government gets in, right? At any point, you could elect anybody in that party could elect who was going to run the show, correct? So instead of voting for an individual and policies that an individual might carry within their party, you could elect a party that then could elect anybody.
Unless we have a direct election, you will never vote for the PM. The PM will always be appointed.
Right, and that's what I find interesting. I guess I still don't get that whole part of politics as a whole in this country.
Why?
Because
it doesn't. But I mean, look at your situation in America at the moment.
I mean, absolutely.
You can't. Well, unless you go through the lines of impeachment, like they're currently doing, you can't get rid of the president once they're in position.
As opposed to
whilst the PM can.
So what's this law that Boris is changing today about there not being able to be a government in power that can't make decision or something like that? There's some sort of a thing that's passing, or that he's putting forward to Parliament.
Won't be anything passing because they're not in position yet.
There was something. The guy downstairs just mentioned it to me. There's some sort of a. So the situation is he was a government that couldn't go forward with Brexit because they didn't have a majority in government at the time.
Yes.
Right. So
they could have gone through with Brexit. I mean, they did the withdrawal agreement and it was approved by the Commons, so it was going through. It was just voted down on the programme motion, which was basically the time they would have to discuss it and scrutinize it, which is what one of their jobs is.
Right.
They wanted to ram it through and just kind of like do it within a few days, whilst everyone else said, no, we want a longer time to look at this. And so that was what he was voted down for.
And so is that why he pushed the general election then, right?
Yeah, because governments don't like being scrutinized.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I don't understand that, right? I don't understand the basics of that.
What? Which bit?
Both bits. Both. So based on what I was just saying before, like, so apparently, not apparently or allegedly, I suppose this is how rumors get spread or how people don't know what's going on. But what the fella downstairs was talking about was because there wasn't a majority rule, there's some sort of a motion that's being put forward that will stop that being able to happen going forward. I don't know what it is. You'll have to forgive me. I'll have to look it up and we'll talk about it next time.
Don't know exactly what that is.
Okay, cool.
I mean, they have a majority now, so they'll pretty much be able to get through whatever.
To get done whatever they want to get done.
Yeah. But then that also because everyone says, oh, it's going to be a hard Brexit now, and so therefore they can get through exactly what they want to. Now he has a majority. He is not held captive by those on the right of the party which want the hard Brexit. He can soften it now if he wants to.
Right, I see. Okay, yeah, fine. Yeah, so he has majority rule in the parliament. He can go in and he can get shit done, basically.
Yeah, because he's not. Because previously, when you're a minority government or you've only got a very small majority, you kind of have to keep everybody happy. Now he doesn't have to, in his own party. He now doesn't have to keep everyone happy in his party.
And do you think that you learned, where did you get a grasp on politics from? Did you get it from your education at university level, or do you think you have a grasp or had a grasp before?
No, I did an A-level
age?
before that.
So you did an A-level in school where you learned kind of
I was
the
kind of
basics
interested in when I was younger a bit.
Okay, interesting, yeah. I guess it's just one of those things I've never put any time in my life.
Most people don't.
Yeah,
and always, I personally, I'm always wary of people who like politics anyway, because they're normally more partisan. Anybody who's interested in politics is normally partisan, and I'm not particularly partisan at all.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Cool. I think that gives me a little better understanding of how things work. Now, why avoid Brexit as a conversation point? Because you have that much to say about it, you don't think we've got enough time to talk about it, or?
I don't know. I mean, it depends how much you want to know about it. Did we actually finish answering the question? You need to write down what the questions are, which then we can see where we actually answered.
Yeah, I probably should. So apologies to everyone listening to this. I think get back to the point.
Yes.
No, I think you answered the question. I think we've kind of explained how it works as far as constituencies.
Yes, constituencies.
Then all vote a.
We've learned constituencies. We've learned United Kingdom, Great Britain, and Northern Ireland.
Now we had a hung parliament last time this happened.
We did. We had a hung parliament, yes.
So in the event of a hung parliament, so there isn't a majority rule in the 660 available seats, you could get a situation where I believe it was the Northern Irish MPs last time that went with...
Yes, the DUP.
Right. They went with...
Democratic Unionist Party.
Correct. And they then have now withdrawn that, or there's no need for it?
No, they were basically... we were talking about coalitions earlier. So in the last few elections we had the 2010 one. Conservatives.
Who was the Nick Clegg one? Who was Nick Clegg was the Lib Dem, right?
That was that.
Yeah.
So David Cameron became Prime Minister. Conservatives didn't get a majority, so they formed a coalition with the Lib Dems, and Nick Clegg, their leader, became Deputy Prime Minister. And so that was our first coalition since 1945, the wartime coalition.
Okay, so this takes us back to that point that I said we'd revisit before.
Okay.
So
that was a coalition, and then last time when the Conservatives in the 2017 election, where they didn't get a majority, what they formed was something called a confidence and supply motion,
right?
Agreement rather, which is basically the DUP would vote with the government, the Conservatives, on two specific things, which would be Queen's Speech, which is where they set out what legislation they're going to bring in, and also the budget, which is like the running of the finances.
Okay.
So they agreed that they would vote for that specifically, and then everything else they would decide of it at that time. It'd be on ad hoc.
Now, with once
So it wasn't a formal coalition. They didn't go into government with them or anything like that.
but it was still formal enough to actually get them the majority rule and get.
They were a party which is a similar view, so they were going to kind of vote with them on most things anyway.
Right.
But so yeah, they could get a lot of things through.
Okay, and then once an elected party gets the majority rule, they then can elect within that party who's going to do certain jobs within the House, correct? So
the Prime Minister, normally it's whoever's the largest, the leader of the largest party, and that gets appointed the Prime Minister by the Queen, and then that Prime Minister recommends certain people who will be appointed to the posts of various ministers.
And those certain people won't necessarily be part of their own party.
They're mostly of the Conservatives, yes. They would be mostly of the largest party.
Yeah. But if there's a great candidate who we know is like, I don't know, education secretary who's done a fantastic hands down job for the last 8 years, and they're part of the other party, chances are they're still going to get the boot, and
there we go
from there. And so what about so this was something that I heard recently as well.
Okay.
So if you're an elected MP, you're on a salary of, I don't know, what is it, like 60 grand a year or something like that?
I think it's a bit more than that.
Is it? Okay, well, let's just say for argument's sake it's 60 grand.
It is a large amount, but it's not necessarily. It could be larger,
right?
Even though most people wouldn't hate that.
Could or should be larger.
Probably should be larger. Yes.
Now, why do you believe that?
There is the argument that we want the best people, and so therefore, if we pay bigger wages, then we would get the best people. There would also, if we paid them more, we wouldn't have to do things like expenses or anything like that. It is expensive being an MP.
Yeah, I mean, look, okay, there's two things that I would say.
See, a lot of the people, you're probably going to be one of them,
I'm
be
definitely
very dismissive of politicians.
I'm definitely going to be one of them.
They do a very difficult job, and it's hard for them.
I am not saying that politicians do not do a difficult job. I am saying that in line with so to say that you'll get better people by paying more, I don't believe that.
That was the old argument.
Yeah,
whether that's now the case or not, it's.
Yeah, I definitely don't believe that, and I think.
But you also, it's expensive to run for an MP for a start. You would have to leave your job. You would have to pay for a lot of the things, literature yourself and things like that. So it is expensive to run. So the problem is, if you do not pay them enough, then you will only get the people who can personally afford to do it become MPs, and you don't necessarily want those.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. All right.
For example, Laura Smith, our former MP, she was a teacher.
Yes. She was a teacher, not a political background except for locally, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So she had a political background?
No, I mean, she was related to, I think she did some trade union stuff.
Okay.
But her background was teaching. So she was, I presume, therefore had no personal wealth. So therefore she couldn't be, she's not like somebody who like has a personal wealth. A lot of someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example, who has quite a large personal fortune, and so therefore who could see being an MP as just kind of like something to do.
I got sidetracked from the original point I was going to make, which was like, let's say they make like 60 grand a year. Mm-hmm. All of the MPs that lost their seat in this last election, do they get paid like a severance? Do they get paid like something under employment law or something? Do they get paid to leave or?
They do. It is dependent on how long they were an MP. It is also dependent on whether they stood again, which is slightly unfair. If they stood down for various, for example, if they left a party and their party had no chance of winning,
right?
Therefore they would have to stand in independent, which would cost a lot of money. Or if they stood down because of the abuse they were getting, for example, then no, they wouldn't get paid at all.
Ah, okay. So it's just like,
so they have to kind of stand again in order to get some money, but they do get a bit, but not too much.
Okay, cool. And so,
but don't forget, there's also all their staff they employ as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's got to be like so. So, for instance, when they run a local surgery, there will be staff that man that place like 9 to 5.
Yeah.
But that's taken care of by the party, right?
No, it'd be paid for by the MP, but they get some expenses and things for that.
Right. Okay. So expenses like that aside, I think that the rest of it, I don't see paying MPs more and giving them carte blanche to. I say I don't say that, but if I say, for instance, employ someone, and rather than employing somebody on a contractual basis where I give them, let's say for argument's sake, we pay somebody $30,000 a year, and then I pay their expenses, but I have to have a damn good eye on their expenses. So, for instance, I know that you're not out at Miller and Carter every night, like eating 15-ounce ribeyes till you want to blow up, and you're spending 120 quid a night, that kind of thing. I suppose, what would I rather do? Would I rather pay them a salary and then scrutinize their expenses, or would I pay them more and hope that they then would scrutinize their own expenses? I don't know if I can answer that, I don't know if my guys would do it, because I've always been of a mindset when it comes to company expenses, bar one employer that I had, that I on purpose would go every single night and buy the most expensive bottle of wine I could buy, and I had my own wine collection at home. Bar one time I used to do that. I'd forego eating dinner and I'd buy my whole entire allowance, which was 25 pounds, I'd buy the most expensive bottle I could get.
Well, there's a lot of stick about expenses. For example, like travel expenses. Now, so an MP may have to be somewhere for something, and then they have to be somewhere else very soon, and so they will get a taxi, and then they would charge that. Automatically they would put it into the system for every single thing.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then you get reports where, well, they charge a taxi for this kind of 10-minute walk and everything. Well,
no,
yeah.
that's different. That's different. I don't think the average person has a problem with that. I think what the average person has a problem with is like 2 stately homes, one in their local, one right next to downtown London, so they can get to Parliament in 10 minutes, and then having a stately manor in the middle of wherever their constituency is. I think that's the issue that people have when it comes to expenses. It's just wrong that it shouldn't happen. I'm pretty sure that's the case, right? The average person isn't going to scrutinize whether or not someone needed to get somewhere in 15 minutes.
Oh, they do. They do things like that.
They have no common sense, so forget them. I'm not really that worried about that.
But it'd be things like when they do have to have a flat because their constituency is further away, and then they would buy furniture for it, and then they'll be, well, why are they buying this furniture? Well, they need to sit on something. But then it's kind of like it's like, do we just specifically buy them certain furniture for them to have, or can they choose their own furniture? And that's where we kind of like gets kind of like nitpicking about it all.
Yeah, but again, I don't know. I think that they have to have certain luxuries in order to be able to maintain a lifestyle to do that job. I couldn't imagine being in...
There's different opinions. People have different opinions on various things.
It's like, just because you're an MP doesn't mean that you can't have a family and you're never home and you're always in London, and the travel back and forth has got to be...
It's very bad on families being an MP.
Yeah, I'm not, by any means am I saying that it's an easy job and that they should make less, etc. I just think that it is relevant or relative that you'd have someone who is essentially a public servant, and should work within those confines of public servitude. Also doesn't need to be elevated to some sort of a rock star status, and be able to enjoy things over the top in life at a taxpayer's expense. No bottles of Moët Chandon for Moët Chandon. I don't even know what it's called. What the hell's Moët Chandon? No bottles of champagne for breakfast and mimosas every day, all day, and all that kind of stuff. I think that's probably what people are saying. So. Anyway, okay, yes. All right, interesting. I kind of dug myself into a little hole there and didn't know how to get out.
That's okay.
Cool. All right, so basically, then, what do you think of what happened with the election? Where do you think we're at now? Where do you think we're going? Personal views.
Oh, personal views?
Well, personal views or views on how you think it'll play out. So for instance, Brexit. Do we think Brexit will go through with swift speed now?
Hopefully, it will be less complicated now, and I hope it is softer than what they were kind of like thinking of previously.
What do you mean by that? Like doom and gloom, or?
The softer as in, it was kind of like, well, we're going to leave the EU and then we're going to just crash out and then we're going to go off and do our own agreements with everybody else. I hope that's not the case. I mean, I understand we're going to leave. That's fine. But we're still going to have to do a lot of business with the EU. So I'd rather we kind of like continue with some agreement along those lines.
See, I have a different take on Brexit and the strategies that it will take to go on past signing a date that says, okay, from this day we leave the EU or not. I reckon it's kind of like divorce. Okay, we're going to divorce ourselves from the EU. There's going to be some shit that isn't going to sit well, and there's going to be other stuff that's going to be like, okay, we can live with that. But just like in divorce, when you have things, so let's make it akin to if you have children in a marriage, and you have a divorce, and you may have loads of disagreements in the first place about that divorce and about what you're going to do with the kids. Eventually, you're going to have to find common ground. So the EU and England will have to find common ground on everything from toothpaste tariffs, exporting whatever in and out of the EU. To oil and important commodities and goods, right? And eventually we will have to negotiate all the right things in all the right places in order to be able to get on with it. And I think if you have to rip the Band-Aid off to do that, short-term pain, long-term gain. That's my own personal opinion.
No.
Why? Why do you say that though? Well,
now we're getting.
You're never ever going to be able. You do realize how many like stacks of paperwork and bureaucracy, how much bureaucracy there is, and everything that we trade to deal with. That's what they get paid to do. They're public elected officials that work with VAT, everything from VAT to goods and commodities to if I've got a product that I want to then export to the EU, I understand that it's going to potentially cripple me as a business owner, right? If I can't make those deals. But that has to happen, and you're never, ever going to be able to go down that list and just tick them all off and get to a point where it would take years to even come close to figuring out how to do it. Yet when we joined the EU, I bet it didn't take years to figure it out in the first place.
Yeah, it took a long time to.
Did it?
Yeah.
Again, this is me being.
Join.
How long did it take to join?
Well, we first proposed it in the late 50s, early 60s, and we didn't join until the 70s.
Really? Wow. Okay. All right.
Well, part of that's because we were rejected a few times.
Rejected by the EU?
No, rejected by France mostly.
Okay.
De Gaulle said no.
Again, these are things that I don't know about, and I don't know the history of it, so I find that really interesting.
My view personally is we shouldn't have joined in the first place because our ideas and systems and everything are not necessarily compatible with the EU.
Yeah, okay, like you're talking about socialism, like our socialist system and stuff like that, or what are you talking about?
Not necessarily. I mean, that's the way we kind of like go about our politics and our views and our views on the world, I think, are different a lot to the continent. The way they have gone about things. A lot of the countries, for example, like Germany, for example, is its history, and not the history you're probably thinking I'm thinking, the history prior to that, of being a confederacy and being lots of small states, is a completely different mentality to us. We are much more of a centralized system and than they are, and so therefore rather than joining what was then the EEC and before that and everything, the steel and coal community, we created what was EFTA with some other states. We joined with Austria and Ireland and then Scandinavian countries, the European Free Trade Association. Which was much more economic focused rather than political union,
right?
Which was much better for us. But we were always kind of like going towards the economic aspects of it. That was what we were always all about. And so that's why we eventually did join the EU, for the economic benefits. And we pretty much had our way. We've kind of like converted it to how we wanted it to be.
Yeah.
We've won all of those arguments.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like larger.
But we should have stayed. We should have stayed out, and we should have like aligned after with what is now the EU in terms of economics. But we should have never gone in because of the political aspect of it.
And by that you mean
things like ever closer union and stuff like that.
Right. Okay, interesting. Okay, I mean, yeah, I mean, the concept of the EU makes perfect sense to me. As larger bodies all banding together, or smaller countries banding together, in order to get that strength. I think that the bare bones of it is the where Brexit is all an immigration issue to me. Like as an immigrant in the UK, I think it's a big part of it. I think a lot of the things that people can't understand is why. So for instance, look at our high street here in Crewe. Okay, if you walk from here at the studio to to our place, you're gonna pass, I don't know how many grocery stores that used to be community grocery stores that were probably English. Now they're all Polish shops from here to.
Well, that's nothing new, though.
That's nothing new.
I mean, we had immigration from the Caribbean. From Asia.
Yeah. No. So, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it.
So things like corner shops were obviously heavily Asian-based prior to whoever owns them now.
Right, but my point being is I believe that a lot of people made it a European issue, made it a fact that we have a large population now of migrant immigrants in the UK that we didn't have before. They probably weren't migrant. They probably were coming to the UK to stay here rather than come to just work and go again. I think that a lot of people think.
But then that was what was originally the Caribbean.
Sure.
They were only just going to be here for a while and then go back.
Look, I mean, I'm here from somewhere else. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. You know what I mean? It's just, but I'm saying as far as understanding the issues, I don't understand Brexit overall. I don't think it's when we talk about a manifesto and reading a manifesto, who can read what Brexit is actually going to be in the long run and what
Brexit. I mean, as a same with any vote, as the general election, people vote for different reasons. Brexit is once again different reasons. There's no specific one issue. It is to one person. Some people it is all about either the economic aspects of it. Some of it is, some people it's about immigration. Some people it's part of a political union.
But either way, it's happening now. So that's what we got to figure out. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that'll be interesting to figure out.
But it could be, as I said, it could be a lot different than it was going to be.
Yeah, a funny thing is I come off often, and I don't know whether or not it's because I have an argumentative personality on social media, but I will ask questions or point out certain things on posts like we had happen or whatever in the last week, and I will come off as either sounding incredibly ignorant on a subject that I know nothing about, or as an opposing side, which I'm not. I'm really just trying to understand sometimes what the actual issue in the first place is. But for me, I mean, again, I look at Brexit and I just think, really, overall, the average person probably is very similar to myself and has no idea what the actual policies we have against.
Oh, we are exceedingly ignorant about the EU in this country, about how it works and everything.
So,
but that's partly because the political. I was going to use establishment, but I hate the term establishment. The political classes, maybe, I don't know. They haven't wanted us to necessarily know about the EU.
What can you do to rectify that? What can you do to get knowledge on these kind of things? Like,
you can read about it.
You can read about it, but for instance, where do you start? Did you just try to assimilate information on the like a factual article is a thing of the past, right? You have an article that has to be entertaining, that's going to talk about why this is happening, what's going on, and it's going to have to. I can't sit down and do that. Like, this is kind of what I was talking about to you before. Like, one of the reasons I want to do this is to actually have conversations, and hopefully some of this will actually stick after we have this conversation, and I won't be asking the next 6 people the exact same questions. But pieces and parts will obviously land, right? When it comes to information like Brexit, and knowing about what's actually going to happen or what it's for and what it's all about, I think it just comes down to the bare bones of people will have their own agendas.
We probably know more about the EU now in the last few years than we ever did previously.
And what is that from, though? That's what I'm saying. How can you rectify it?
That's from the debate on Brexit.
Debates on Brexit, public education? Is it
people
just social media?
People have just learned much more about it.
Yeah.
From the election afterwards.
A lot of times I sit back and I wonder if there's like some sort of an online learning portal that the government should make available to you. Like the Open University, for instance, in this country is a paid for university program, right?
Well, have you ever done the test you have to do?
I've never done the test. You mean the immigration test? You mean
there's the one related to.
I couldn't answer anything on it. Barely.
Oh, there's a whole thing. Yes.
Yeah. No,
you probably still you'll have to do that.
I've never even looked at it. Eventually, I'm going to have to look at it.
Like what to do if you spill someo's pint in a pub.
Yeah,
that kind of question.
That's actually on the test, is it?
That was on one of the tests. Yes.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, but there's life lessons, and then I'm talking about this is what I'm talking about for average everyday people, right? Like how do you actually? Social media is also, as in my mind, also become a place where people learn the wrong bits of information. Mm-hmm. And I often sit back and I think, well, how do I know what I'm getting? Is life all just an algorithm? How do you fight the algorithm of information that comes towards you? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you actually search something out? How will someone find this video on YouTube without stumbling across it or someone recommending it? How will I find out information about anything from carp fishing through to whatever?
I would think in order to do that, the first thing is to not necessarily believe the first thing you read. So kind of like see a few things before you have an opinion.
Absolutely.
And secondly, make sure you see it from different places. In order to understand something, you should always look at the opposite.
Yeah.
So if you want to understand why we want to leave the EU, look at reasons why we don't want to leave the EU.
And do you think that they're listed factually anywhere?
Yeah.
Okay, so the manifesto should be that, right? So we were talking earlier about, so the manifesto is exactly the same thing as the EU, right? So it's a direction. It's more of a blueprint for what we want to put forward.
Oh, the manifesto.
So why at this stage in the game have we not got something that says these are the plus points for staying, these are the plus points of leaving, and these are the actual facts? I think personally,
because there's different facts,
but there shouldn't be. The government should sit down and have an independent report made that says this is exactly what is going to happen if we leave the EU. This is exactly potentially what the outcome of us leaving the EU will look like monetarily.
But they don't know.
Well, that's my point then. So how can you make a decision on whether or not it's right to stay or to go if they don't know? Somebody somewhere, there are a lot more people, a lot more clever than us. Mm-hmm. Economics,
But they don't know either.
No, they don't know, but they have a pretty damn good idea. They've got somebody's driving the ship. Are we just aimlessly floating through space on a rock, hoping that it's all going to end in the right way? Right? You see what I'm saying, right? Like I don't understand why it's something that we've debated for 3 years now, and yet there still isn't a black and white. These are the outcomes of staying. These are the outcomes of going.
Because there's also different ways of leaving. There's still. We could still have some connection to it in some form, and so therefore there's different aspects of leaving. It's not just like straight we leave and that's it. We could still what kind of relationship we would have with them. There's different outcomes. We don't know those outcomes necessarily. We can guess at what those outcomes could be.
How come we don't have anybody who's guessed? How come we don't have anybody who's guessed?
We have had people who have guessed.
Where is a simple explanation to the average everyday person?
Simple. You cannot find something because that's the thing. Like you can get something simple, but then someone will come along and say, "Well, what about that though? And what about that?" Which will make it complicated, and so therefore you get it. It just multiplies and multiplies, and there's like different alleyways you can go down, which can make it just completely complicated for any simple, normal person to understand.
Yeah.
I don't understand it all.
No. By no means am I saying you should or do, but I think you'll probably have a better grasp on it than most.
You have general kind of like gists about it, and just kind of look at an overview.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Well, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this. This is exactly what I want.
Okay.
I hope that some of it sunk in, and I hope that some of it will continue to sink in. Let's definitely do it again. Let's talk about finer points, and maybe I'll do some better research next time. But hopefully, this will be the beginning of a very interesting stage in my either midlife crisis or in my own personal development. I really want to do these kind of things, just to try and be a better person, man.
Maybe we should also throw it out to our audience if we have one.
Yeah.
If they have questions, they should.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing.
As well.
This is the thing about all these kind of things, is that I hope that will happen, and then that we can then talk further about it in the future, right? Mm-hmm. So, thanks very much, and let's see if I can get this right.
We have the jingle at the end.
I haven't really practiced this very much, but I appreciate it, dude. Thanks. Take it easy.
You're welcome.
Oh, it worked. Right on. All right, that's it. Well, we go. Painful? A little bit. I thought it was all right. Sweet.